We dive in right in the midst of our conversation about my last podcast about romantic subplotting. Let's jump right in.
I love that's one thing that Amanda Arista covered in her talk was the fact that we could use romance as like a character development tool
Exactly.
or to show like background or anything like that and how relations really work in the book, like especially in contextualizing the character themselves or the plot.
Right. And I write mystery. So you really have to get into the motivations and the personalities and the characters to make it work. And adding that extra onion skin of a little bit of romantic subplot, works for me.
And that's something she had mentioned to me that she really loved as far as content specifically, speaking of which, for just in general for writers to consume. She said as a writer now, she wants to consume something more craft related, something more niche, like as opposed to something kind of more broad, like these are the top 10 mistakes authors make. She said that's great and all, but she's at a point where she's not making those mistakes necessarily, or she's already kind of identified them. She wants something a little more crafty to work into her writing, or a little more, like I said, niche and specific.
Well, and I'm not even sure niche is the right word. I mean, that's part of why I started Unleashing the Next Chapter Facebook group and I kind of bill it for serious writers, and that's not long face serious, but it's past the beginning stage, because a lot of the advice that we find on those writing blogs and top 10 things not to do kind of thing, they're really geared towards the beginning writers. And I needed more meat. Not to say I'm that advanced, I'm definitely not that published, but when I was reading the same thing over and over and over, and it's like, okay, now what?
Exactly. And that was kind of the rabbit hole I've fallen down into in some regard, because I keep seeing the same things either over and over or like different versions of the same thing.
Yes.
And I want to see something more specific. Like,
yes.
how do I create this amazing character? How can I use romance as a plot point, or even as character development for a character in a murder mystery or elsewhere, maybe in women's fiction?
And then there's the subgenres. A lot of the advice is geared to the overriding umbrella genre. Like for mystery, there's 13 subgenres, and I'm working with a speculative fiction author right now, and he's having to explain to me, I'm learning fast, but there's fantasy, there's sci-fi, there's different levels of sci-fi, different subgenres of sci-fi even, and then there's there's another category. There's 3 categories. I've already forgotten the third one. But, I think each of those require specific expectations of the audience and separate ways of developing the characters and any romantic subplots that might be there.
Just so people know, since you mentioned Unleashing the Next Chapter, can you kind of tell us, like, who is Kathryn McClatchy?
So I'm 51 now, and that's a really big question, and every year it gets bigger. I started out loving reading and dreamed of being a writer from, like 2nd grade. I started my first manuscript. But then, I had parents who wanted me to get a job that would pay the bills and that I could be independent with. So I went into business. My background is in marketing and finance, and I worked with insurance companies, and I worked with newspapers, and I worked with market research companies. The newspapers where I finally got the chance to write, because I was an ad exec and I was helping our advertisers come up with their advertising strategies. And this is back in the 80s and 90s, right before we even thought of the internet, let alone we're using it. I was working for a market research company the first time my boss said I needed to go to the state university, ask the librarian if she could pull up some information on this thing called the internet. And I had to go, wait, what? What are you talking about? That was kind of cool. And I fell in love with the research, and I fell in love with working with different companies and working with different reasons for advertising and studies and all of that. And then I had kids, and I decided to kind of change path. I worked in coaching. I started coaching swimming. It was another passion of mine, and I could do it on the side while my kids were little, and ended up over a decade working with athletes and getting to take a couple to the Olympic trials and working with Olympic caliber coaches and athletes. And that was really exciting. And that kind of got me geared up to coaching. And I decided, this is what I want to do. This is my calling. Come to find out, if I wanted to move up the rung as a coach, I was already a nationally certified coach, but to go on to coaching university, I had to coach high school. And to coach high school, you have to have a teaching certificate in Texas. So I went back to school figuring the fastest way I could get my teaching certificate was English, because English was always easy. I took English classes in college to hold my GPA up for the hard business classes, and not that they were easy classes, but English just came intuitively to me. Lo and behold, fell in love with teaching English. I taught college, university English, rhetoric, composition, and Victorian literature. My master's research was in Victorian crime fiction. So it was very fun for me, and I got to hang out at the pool and coach and work with the athletes, and did a lot of work with motivational and sports psychologists. And so I learned a lot of psychology through the coaching side of it. And then in 2006, I'm living the dream. And finally, I was coaching a college team, and I was teaching at the university and loving life. And I went to California to do a research trip and hang out in the Geisel Library at University of California, San Diego. And on the flight back, I started a migraine that just never went away. And 2 weeks later, I had my first stroke. I've since survived 5 strokes, possibly 6, heart surgery, and I am technically disabled, but I had to learn everything again. I get bored real easily. So in the process of rehabbing and learning to read and write and speak again, lo and behold, this thing called Facebook had just come out. So I got involved with Facebook for hand-eye coordination, learning to type again, and being able to communicate with friends and family. And it wasn't too many years later, I got involved with the writing community, because I decided, if I can't do anything else, I've got all this education in literature, I can write. Yeah. So somebody neglected to tell me that the part of the brain that analyzes literature is very different from the part of the brain that creates literature. And so I really thought it would be a smooth transition, because I'd been studying these, great works of the British literature. And it's not so easy to actually put the words down on paper. But about that time too, I started realizing that this social media thing, by then I was on Facebook and Twitter. Instagram was just something people were talking about. And it clicked in my head that, hey, this is advertising. I know advertising. So I really fell in love with that. And I started Unleashing the Next Chapter as a blog. It started as a blog as I was learning to write and kind of tracking what I was doing there. And people were interested in what I was writing, and that was really kind of cool. And then as I got more and more involved in the writing community, and about the time you and I ran into each other and became friends, it dawned on me that although my education was in teaching literature, that's not what the writing community needed. There were so many fabulous published authors in North Texas that were able to teach writing and teach those craft points to authors so much better than I could. But what was lacking was nobody was telling the writers how to properly market themselves, how to present themselves on social media, how to come up with blog posts and content that was more than just, I wrote 1,500 words today and, oh yeah, I got another rejection. So that kind of became my mission, to combine the marketing and the writing and to work with authors. And so Unleashing the Next Chapter has since grown from a little blog. Last year, it became a DBA. It also launched its own online community back before COVID because of my disability. Now, I also have trouble getting around without my service dog. So a lot of times it's not real convenient to do in-person things. And then I also am extremely light sensitive. So every time I leave my home, I know I have a 50-50 chance of being hit by a strobe light in the form of a camera flash, in the form of emergency lights, whatever. And that's going to knock me out for a couple of days. I built Unleashing the Next Chapter because I needed a writing community that was online, that I could access asynchronously. I didn't have to wait, because I was a member and on the board of a number of writing organizations, but they only met once a month. And if that happened to be the night I was in bed with a migraine, I missed it for another month.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed a writing community that I could check into when I needed it, when I was healthy and could participate or could contribute. That's how the Facebook group got started. And Unleashing the Next Chapter, like I said, is for serious writers, not newbies. I love newbies, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of resources available for those just starting out. And
Mm-hmm.
I was struggling to find a writing community of people who were ahead of me on the journey, who were already publishing, who were already indie publishing, who were needing marketing and different business strategies to get them to the next level, because I knew I could contribute to that, but I needed people who were ahead of me on the writing journey who could help me to that next level. So Unleashing the Next Chapter is a Facebook group that incorporates a lot of productivity, a lot of building online author platforms, social media tips and tricks, and then we always have one craft session each month. So every week we have a online coaching, and they're recorded and played back later. So if you miss it, because we're an international community now and we have people on all time zones, so a lot are working, a lot are home, a lot are night writers, a lot are morning owls and or morning larks, and so we try to be inclusive of everybody. All genres are welcome, including nonfiction, including those that are writing content, copywriting, and other things. So there's a lot of creative entrepreneurs who don't consider themselves fiction writers or novelists, but they still need the same techniques and business savvy on the publishing end to promote their creative endeavors. So we reach out to those people also.
I love how smart you were about it too. You relearned how to, read and talk and everything else after the strokes, but then you went ahead and learned new skills on top of that with social media and how to engage, and then found a need within the community that you had kind of branched out to, that the writing community, and said, hey, I have this expertise and I can help.
Yeah, and that's one of the questions we ask. There's those 3 qualifying questions or whatever when you join a Facebook group. And one of the things I ask people is, what area of expertise do you bring to the group, either vocationally or avocationally? Because I firmly believe everybody is an expert in something. And I did not realize that my expertise was something I took for granted. Marketing came second nature to me. Social media and technology came second nature to me. And it wasn't until I started going to some of the writing groups and I'm trying to explain, you need to do this, this, and this. And they're going, wait a minute, back up. I have no idea even the language you're speaking. So I do a lot of public speaking for writing groups, explaining some of these. Like, we've become a Zoom community. I've been doing Zoom classes, teaching people how to use Zoom, and doing an advanced applications for writers with Zoom. There's so many applications that most of us have no idea are available, or how to use the basics in a different way. So I think as long as technology is changing, and of course this all happened at the same time that publishing changed, right?
Yeah.
When I had my strokes in 2006, we still had the big publishing houses in New York, and everybody wanted to be traditionally published. And then as I started relearning things, suddenly indie publishing became something that we're all hearing about. And over the last few years now, a lot of people are indie published and hybrid published. So I think as long as technology is changing and as long as publishing itself is changing, we as writers must change and keep up. Yeah, I had to learn new things, but I think we all did to a large degree.
But I know that writers too focus on their writing, which is fair. They're writers. You should focus on your writing. But a lot of them don't know quite the world of marketing. They don't quite understand the world of marketing because maybe they haven't been exposed to it, or they don't know it, or maybe in a lot of cases they're intimidated by it. I love specifically Unleashing the Next Chapter because you bring on experts who break it down in a way that's easily digestible and doesn't make like I'm not intimidated by marketing. You know that. We've talked about
Yeah,
this before.
we have a similar background. Yeah.
We have similar backgrounds. But I know too, like a lot of people, like a lot of my author friends will shrivel up like in the fetal position and just be like, no,
Right.
I don't want to,
Right.
like, I don't want to do social media. I don't want to do marketing. But you make it so easy. Like you find these experts and you provide this content that is easily digestible for, like you said, writers who aren't quite newbies, who are kind of maybe fairly well into their writing journey in some
Right.
capacity, but you can easily use that information. You don't feel intimidated by it. You don't feel overwhelmed by it, which is a big
Well,
thing.
exactly. And I think that's why the word community is so important, right? It's not I'm coming in, I'm teaching the material, and if you don't get it, sorry, I'm off to the next thing. Like a lot of in-person groups, they bring in speakers, but then you have no access to the speaker. I try to pull members of our community who are already members and active in the community and ask them to present. So every week we have a different presenter who leads our group coaching, and some of them are really formal, presentation, PowerPoint, the whole thing. And some of them are just like, hey guys, I got stuff to talk about, but if you have questions on this topic, shoot, and I'll just sit here and answer questions. And those are some of the best sessions, I think, because people are getting their specific questions answered. And a lot of times we actually have more conversation and brainstorming sessions as well. So I love that because we're drawing from our own community, they're available. So if I learn something from you next week, and then in the process of applying it next month, I come up with more questions, I know who to go to and work with on this. And we also offer, there's a mentoring option in Facebook groups. So you can sign up to be a mentor because you have this expertise, and then you can simultaneously sign up if you want to be a mentee because you have this need and you need somebody to lead you through. So I love that the Unleashing the Next Chapter community is very, very give and take and very collaborative.
And the content is specific.
Every month I sit down and we have 4 weeks a month. Every once in a while we get a bonus fifth, but we have 1 week's going to be social media, 1 week's going to be author platform, 1 week's going to be productivity, and 1 week's going to be craft of writing. And we have people that their day jobs are in business and they bring great things to us. We have folks that are retired. We have folks that have traveled the world. We have folks that are university professors. We have folks that are university students. We have homeschooling, a couple teenagers that were homeschooled that they bring a very fresh and unique perspective because they learn by doing so much more. Mm-hmm. So I love that we have that specific guideline, but even within, if you say social media, I mean, that's a whole world unto itself. So we'll never run out of content.
I mentioned that since we come from similar backgrounds, we kind of know somewhat about social media, but I'm always learning something new depending on the content you're posting with these experts.
I love it. I love it. And and nobody's ever the expert. I use that term really loosely because, as you know, we each have different strengths and weaknesses and need to learn things based on our usage, right? So like I was real comfortable on Facebook, and then with Twitter, you and I were working together for one of the organizations we volunteered in, and I couldn't get any engagement on Twitter until you finally said, no, look at it this way. And you just gave me like a 2-minute thing that opened the whole world for me. And now I'm off and running. So I think learning from each other when you need the information is so integral.
Well, and that's a great point. I remember that conversation, but it's really important to know too that your content's gonna vary between each platform. It necessarily isn't going to be the same like on your blog as it is, like you said, on Twitter or on Instagram. It's going to vary according, I think, to the platform you're using and who your audience is.
Well, and that's the thing that I now know. I didn't know, 4 years ago when I pulled you aside in tears going, why can't I do this? But it's not even just the platform. It's that each platform brings a different audience to it. So my community in the Unleashing Facebook group is very different than my community on Instagram, which is very different than my community on LinkedIn. And the purpose I'm writing for has to be different for each of those. You know, Instagram's picture driven, right? Twitter's hashtag driven. LinkedIn is business driven. So I have to keep in mind as I'm creating content who my audience is, which is something every good writer should do. You got to know who your audience is, who you're writing for, and you have to fill their need. And if in the format that you're given, right? Twitter's 280 words, and I think every author should be, or 280 characters. Every author should be on Twitter simply because it teaches you to use words so precisely, you know. So each format has its own parameters, but I look at it all as writing practice and drilling.
I appreciate Twitter and so much because as a writer, it's driven by writing, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
But not only that, but it has taught me so much to get rid of junk words.
Yes.
Like I have like I would like write something out and I would have too much, way too much, like 2 sentences worth of too much. So I would learn to siphon it down. And I was like, how can I get all this information into this little compact box, basically,
Right.
this little compact tweet? And it has helped me to get rid of those junk words, to really hone in and like get only the meat of what I need to get in there.
Oh my goodness, if you need to know what your filler words are, just and so. I can't tell you how many times I use just and so. And in
Same.
Texas, come to find out, we use way too many pronouns. So I cut down on the pronouns, the just and the so's, and I know I'm halfway home.
I did not know that about Texas. Texas uses a lot of pronouns.
Yeah, I moved to Texas as I was finishing up high school, and it was almost like learning a new language. Literally, a lot of the words, I had no idea what they were talking about. My parents shipped me, we moved to Texas in July, and 2 weeks here, my folks sent me to church camp so I could meet girls before, you know, school started. And I laid in my bunk and I cried the first 2 nights because, honest to goodness, I did not know what they were talking about. A lot of the words were the same, but they were used differently. And a lot of the ways they phrased and the intonations were so different than what I was used to. So now I've been here long enough, I you know, fit right in. But I have to be careful of pronouns. And I find it more obvious when I'm sending emails back and forth with my friends in Australia or England or someplace else where they use language a little bit differently even.
And that's very fair because I've figured that out too. I know for sure just and so are 2 of my biggest crutch words.
You too.
But that is so good to know too, that the pronouns, because I have never thought about that. Has never crossed my mind, but I do know that language is different. Like demographically, we all speak English in the United States, but like in the South, it's different than the Northeast.
Well, and in Texas, because we're so influenced by Mexico, you know, double negatives we use all the time. In Wisconsin, I would have been beaten for that. I mean, I can just see my English teachers turning colors when you try to use a double negative, but that's correct grammar in Spanish. So it floods into how we use our English.
I really like that you point that out because that's a great tool to learn as a writer. What are your junk words, and where are you situated in the United States where they use different language differently?
Exactly. And you need to know that if you're, you know, have a character in Milwaukee, she would never ask for the water fountain. She wants to know where the bubbler is. You know, there's word usages that are different regionally. And if you want to have your character have that level of reality, you need to know what the idiosyncrasies are in the language in that space. And you know, it's not just about setting and dress and what streets they're crossing. It's about their word choices and their grammatical choices. I grew up in, like I said, in Wisconsin, in a very German community. My grandparents were German immigrants, and a lot of my language, grammar, syntax, structure was based on German grammar. So it's very interesting, and I find it fascinating. There's no right or wrong. It's just, if you want to be a regional author, you need to know that this is what it is so you can use it strategically, right? There's no right or wrong, but you can be strategic about it. They say, what's the saying, you have to know the rules before you can break the rules. And I think that works with linguistics as well, and that's just one of my little side passions.
Yeah, I see. And I love the fact that Twitter kind of helps you hone that a bit.
Yes.
So, I mean,
Yes.
that was just a quick aside. I love Twitter for that. And I kind of been utilizing it more and more in order just to kind of see where I am as far as like, are my junk words, how many more junk words do I do? Because I use a lot of this and that too,
Right.
occasionally.
So I'll throw this out as a tip for your listeners, because I know a lot of us are novelists and we're much comfortable in the long form. But when I write content for social media, I write my longest piece first. So if that's a blog post or a YouTube script or something, whatever's going to be the longest happens first. And then I shorten it up to fit the next one. So Instagram allows 2,200 characters. That's usually my next longest piece. And then I take out, the things that maybe aren't relevant for the Instagram audience. And then I post there. And then maybe I do it for Facebook or Twitter. And when I do the Twitter post, what I do is I take like a paragraph that's essential out of the long thing, and maybe I get 2 or 3 Twitter posts out of what started as a blog post, and then I carve it down and I check my pronouns and I check, am I speaking too regionally, because Twitter, remember, is an international community right up front, so you have to be precise in your word usage. But you can be very productive in your content creation if you will start with the longest format first and then take bits and pieces and spread it out on the other formats.
So you don't really change the initial long form, do you?
It depends on, my audience and my purpose. It always comes back. I taught rhetoric, so it always comes back to audience, purpose, and style or genre. So if I know that my audience needs the same information across the different platforms, then yes, I will use the same information. If I find that, like LinkedIn may not be as interested in something fun and silly that I put on Instagram, so maybe that doesn't translate straight up. But maybe the image works and I just have to change the caption a little bit. So I try to get as much bang for the buck, if you will.
And I want to get your thoughts on this as well. If you kind of like, say you're struggling to come up with more content, sometimes I've heard you may want to look at what other authors are doing in your genre and kind of see what they're doing, if you can get any inspiration or even try to do something.
Okay, so that would be my last ditch suggestion.
Okay.
What I like coaching writers to do is to come up with the topics you are passionate about, whatever themes keep showing up in your writing, and write about those things. There is no reason you have to write about writing just because you're a writer. We are all multifaceted. If you are not your own dynamic character, that's what you got to do first. So I have 9 or 12 categories of things that I write content about, and these are things that are important to me, things that show up in my writing. Freedom is a big thing in my writing, and now that you know my story, having to figure out how to live again, and not being as independent as I once was, since I don't drive. I mean, that's a big deal. But I look at I write about literacy. I write about religious freedom. I write about freedom of speech. Those are all things that are relevant to me as a writer. I write about invisible disabilities because, hello, I look normal, but not so much. And you've seen me crash and burn in public, so you can testify. Yes. This body is not normal, no matter how good it looks on a good day. So those are all topics that I write about and that I've built my community around, as far as outside other writers, right? Because the thing is, when you're using social media, you're looking for your ideal readers. Your ideal readers are not other writers. Your ideal readers are the readers who are going to buy your books. And if you don't connect with them, they're not going to buy your books. And you need to, I hear it over and over, hashtag writing community on all platforms. And then people get upset because nobody buys their book. Well, their only community has been other writers, and we're your colleagues, not your readers.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure that you're focusing in on who's reading your genre and what their interests are. So I post about plants. I post about what I'm reading. I post about my service dog. I post about migraine awareness and stroke awareness, because those are two big deals for me. Mental illness, these are all things that are considered invisible disabilities. So under that, banner, I do that. And sometimes I rotate those, my 9 to 12 things I try to hit at least a couple of times a month. And then I also look at the national calendar days. I think that's a great source of inspiration, because yesterday or the day before was National Nonprofits Day. So I did a shout out to the nonprofits that I work with. National Chocolate Chip Day. Well, who doesn't love chocolate chips? Got to do a shout out for that. So, I mean, there's some of them are fun and some of them are really serious. And it gives me a chance to show both sides of my interests and personalities and writing talents.
And I love kind of the idea of coordinating too with certain like days or months, because I know of course, like March is International Women's Month.
Yes.
So like there usually a lot of women geared type of content is usually put out. And that's kind of things that like I'm super passionate about. And I know like a lot of readers might be passionate about certain months of awareness if they know that they exist, and if that's something that they would go along with their brand in their content.
Well, and I do that too, to a large degree. I think the first couple of years I was much more month themed. So like April, in February with Valentine's Day, I always challenged myself to read a little more romance and post some blog posts about romance literature or romance date ideas or something. I've been married 30 years. I got some ideas. So I would try to do an overriding monthly focus. October is Victober, and that's all about Victorian literature, which, as I mentioned, is my master's program.
Yes.
So I get all over that. So you can look at those overriding month programs, and see what clicks with you. But again, make it consistent to your genre and your brand. And if you don't know what your brand is, that's the first step. And your brand is more than logos and colors, right? I know I'm preaching to the audience here, but it's your reputation is what your brand is. It's what you want to be known for. So yeah, you have a brand color and a brand fonts and a brand logo and things that are visual, but those are just clues into the bigger thing. And that brand will also lead you to figure out what you want to write about in these smaller formats.
And there's a lot of authors that I follow that I like a lot, but some of the smaller ones, you kind of, sometimes you don't know what their brand is just because they're all over the place.
All over the place. Yeah. Exactly. And it takes a while to find, just like it takes a while to figure out what your voice is as a writer, I think it takes a little while to figure out your brand. Like I said, I came into the writing community having taught university literature, thinking I'm going to come teach writing to writers. I have skills there. Well, lo and behold, my skills were not what they needed. And it was my marketing background that opened up doors for me. People wanted to hear me talk about branding and about social media and about best practices for using time wisely, because don't we all need more time? So those are the things that I had expertise in that I could bring with my love of the writing community and find a place of service. And I think that's just an example that all readers need to know. You have a talent for the audiovisual stuff that I don't have. And you do it so well, why should I take time to learn it, right? I could call Sarah. So, and I think each of us finds our niche if we listen to what our audience wants and needs. When you start finding people asking you questions on a certain topic, or when you find that your friends keep calling you, now explain this again to me, maybe that might be what you need to focus in on and make part of your brand. And then of course the things you're passionate about, you should be writing about what you're passionate about.
Like, and I completely agree with that. I think that can be utilized as part of your branding. If that's something that is always going to be top of mind for you, if that's something you always
Yes.
want to talk about,
Yes.
then, and I think it's smart to utilize, I love the piece of advice you give as far as if people come to you about a certain topic, that probably means that that's something you should also be branding yourself with.
Exactly right. And so many of us, I think, take it for granted. Well, it just comes intuitively to me. Doesn't everybody know that? Well, no. And it took me a long time to realize what comes intuitively to me is not common for everybody. And it doesn't mean I'm special. It just means I have a unique set of skills and interests, and I spend way too much time reading about social media.
No, I'm with you 110%, because I remember too, when we worked with the nonprofit that we both, coming from similar backgrounds, we were kind of like, why don't we do it this way? This makes more sense in a marketing or a business
Yes.
kind of format. And everyone's like, what?
Yes. Yes.
What are you
Because
doing?
yeah, and both of us, I think we were the only two on the board at that point that had a business background. And we looked at things more cost effectively, because when you work corporate, if it doesn't have a dollar sign attached to it, you don't do it. You don't have meetings just to have meetings if there's not something to be gained. And I tend to be very efficient with my time, because I still remember having to put cost codes on every minute spent.
And that's something too that I kind of promote. And I mention to a lot of people, how much impact will this get you? Like this certain thing, because that was kind of a business mindset too. It's like, listen, you can easily miss the forest through the trees.
Yes.
So if you're not too careful, especially with social media, it's easy to kind of scroll through and just kind of mindlessly do it. Are we being impactful?
So right there is one of my other passion points in making sure that the writing community understands there's a difference between being on social media and using social media. Everybody can be on social media. You can post selfies, you can get lots of likes, but that is not strategic use of social media. You've got to come in with a strategy. You got to know why you're posting those selfies. Every 18-year-old in a bikini is going to get a ton of likes, but most of us are not wanting those people following us, right? So you got to be strategic in how you're using social media. Okay, so the other thing that I really want to caution writers is being careful with politics and religion online. We all have political feelings, but you have to know if you get loud about something, you're losing half of your audience. Not everybody thinks alike. And same with religion. Unless that your brand is built around you're a political commentator, or you write Christian literature, or you do comparative religious studies and you post about that, that's fine if that's on point with your brand. But if that has nothing to do with your brand, keep it to your friends and family. Do not let that slide out into your audience, because you will lose a ton of readers that way.
Yes, I've mentioned that to several authors before. Like if your audience is not coming to you for that kind of commentary,
right,
and it's not, like you said, not part of your brand, or something you write about, something you do write about, then I would veer away from it, because it's so easy to get tripped up into that the controversy surrounding it.
Yes. And everyone gets passionate. We all get passionate about it. And I get on Twitter and I have to be really careful. Even because if you like something, people can see your likes and comments on other people's posts. So you want to be careful about what you're liking and what arguments you get in online. And also, Twitter's now introduced lists. So that makes it much easier to stay on point and to use my time productively. I can go to my list of Victorian readers. I can go to my list of agents and authors. I can go to my list of social media professionals and stay on topic and not have to scroll through all the things that I don't have time for.
Absolutely. I'm the same way because I have to be, you talk about being, I know you have a whole talk around it and you mentioned being efficient, and I know you talk about productivity. You have a great talk on that one as well. And that's something I'm trying to be better at as far as utilizing my time. There's only so many hours in a day.
And do you time track? But just recording how you use your time. So you get a like 15-minute increment calendar for the day, and you put in, if it takes you 15 minutes in the shower, an hour to do dinner and dishes, if you spend 15 minutes scrolling internet or more, if you spend way too, and just seeing how you spend your time. So they encourage, when you start the first time, not even trying to change anything, just recording it so you can analyze it. And what I have found is, when I am recording my time, it's kind of like a food diary. I don't want to put down that I ate 3 cookies. So I tend to be more efficient with my time just by nature of recording it. And I get so much done on the days that I track my time. And again, some of it's just subconscious, and some of it is knowing that I'm more accountable when I see it in writing.
Is there an app for time tracking?
Toggle.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. I thought that there was an app for that. App for everything.
There's an app for everything.
Yeah.
So Asana actually has one built in, and I'm a huge lover of Asana, which is a project management software tool. But they have a time tracker in it, and part of it is because it's made for business. You can attach a $sign and account number to it. But then Toggle, same thing, and Toggle works on both your phone as well as your computer, and you can put hashtags and clients on it. And so in my case, I will put what piece of writing I'm working on, if I'm doing content development, or if I'm website building, or if I'm critiquing, whatever it is. So then at the end of the week or month or year, I can see how many hours were total I spent on working on my own manuscript, or how many hours total I spent working on one of my nonprofit clients. So it's really a good way to evaluate your time and make sure that what you say your priorities are is actually where you're putting your time.
And what an eye-opening perspective too, because then you can not only see, like you said, see where you're spending your time, but then are you spending your time usefully?
Yes.
Yes. And you mentioned it very briefly, but it's something I really want to kind of latch on to for a minute, is treating your writing as a business.
Yes. Because that's what makes a difference between authors and writers. I mean, we're all writers if we write. I believe that. But being published and non-published, I think a lot of that is, how much do you treat it like a business? And this really was drilled home when we brought Kate Forsyth over from Australia. If your readers aren't familiar, Kate Forsyth is an internationally best-selling author who lives in Sydney, Australia. And I think she's just finished her 20th best-selling novel.
She gave such a fabulous talk too when she came over a couple of years ago.
And I was so grateful for the one-on-one time I had with her, because I had been a fan for quite a while. And I really had a chance to ask her questions that I didn't know anyone else at the time to ask. And when I heard how she spent her days, and I heard how seriously she treated her writing, it is a job. It is a job. 8 to 10 hours a day, she is focused on her writing. And I saw this wonderful interview with Dean Koontz, who doesn't do many interviews. If your readers aren't familiar, he's a little more paranormal, horror sometimes. I love his stuff. He's smart. He's so smart, and he assumes his readers are smart. But he sits down at the computer with no internet connection 8 to 10 hours a day also. And you think about that and go, that's why these guys are bestsellers.
That's why they're also not just bestsellers, but that's why they're basically writing all these books.
Yes.
Because yes. I've talked to a couple of girlfriends who said, oh, I'm losing readers. I think it's because I'm taking too long to write another book, because they started building up an audience with every book release, but now that audience is caught up on their backlogs.
Right. Well, and I think audiobooks has changed that too, because you don't have to sit down and do nothing else with your hands to read anymore. The
Mhm.
proliferation of audiobooks means you can be listening while you're doing the dishes or folding laundry or driving, So I think that allows readers to read more. And I think that's fabulous, but you're exactly right. If you don't have enough books out there, your reader is going to move on to somebody else. The publishing game has changed.
Right. And even as far as like the last 5-10 years, dramatically. So,
Well, one of the people we know in the North Texas writing community, William Ledbetter, he has won Nebula Awards, and I think he's got like 70 award-winning short stories or something crazy like that. But he just released his last novel directly to audio. There is no print, no ebook. It is only audio.
that's right. And didn't Amazon approach him about that?
I don't remember which direction it happened, but I want to learn more because I'm totally fascinated. And this is so important to me as I had to learn to read and write again. I had a good year. I'd been an English professor and I couldn't read. So I had a long time that I was listening to, whatever my husband could get his hands on at the library and bring home to me, because that's before audiobooks had taken off.
Mm-hmm.
Or the Audible, I mean.
Yes. And then when they were the old school, like cassettes or CDs.
Cassette tapes, yes. Yes.
My mom had a couple of those.
I was so excited when we could take CDs and that it was a much smaller package to put in the car with you.
Uh-huh. So, and I remember too, she'd have, there was one book in particular, and I cannot remember it. I think it was a self-help book, and she had like a whole, there were several CDs, and she had like a whole, almost like a book in itself of it.
Yeah, it's crazy. So much has changed. Technology has changed, and it's going to continue changing. So I think, don't hold too tightly to what you're learning. And the important thing is to learn how to learn and figure out that, it's just new challenges. And the other thing is you don't have to know everything, right? We've been talking about social media and productivity. And you mentioned earlier that so many writers just want to write. And there's still, that's okay. If that's your strong suit and you want to do that 8 to 10 hours of just writing, that's fine. Just make sure you have somebody who's covering the other side of it for you. Like Dean Koontz, I mentioned, his wife Gerda does all of his social media, all of his blogs, all of his fan correspondence. She takes care of the business side for him. So there's not everybody is cut out to do everything. And I think it's a wise person that knows their limitations and knows how to maximize their strengths.
Like you said, kind of leveraging to your tools like the time tracker.
Yes.
So that that, okay, I only want to spend like maybe 15. I want to be strategic with my time. So yes. I just want to spend I want to spend 8 to 10 hours a day writing, if that's your thing. But then I also want to spend but I'll only spend 15 minutes on social media. I only spend so much time on a blog.
There's a principle, and the name of it escapes me, but there's a principle that states that whatever time you have allowed, your task will expand to fill up that time. And why we need to know that in productivity is if you only allow yourself 1 hour, you're amazed how much you get done in an hour. It's like we all know, you get a call, you've got company coming unexpectedly and they'll be there in 20 minutes. Man, have you ever cleaned your house faster? Right?
True story.
You can do miraculous things in those 15 minutes. And I find that true with everything I do. If I limit the amount of time I have, it serves to really focus in on what's important. And that's the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of our activity gets 80% of our results. Exactly. So if you're focusing on what's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck, you want to make sure that you are using your time wisely, effectively, strategically, and by limiting the amount of time you have, you will actually find you're more productive.
Well, and I love both of your suggestion, and I had heard a recent suggestion from a girl I listened to on YouTube. She does more audio geared stuff, but I listened to her, and she was mentioning that she gets very easily distracted. So do I. I am the exact same way. I get so easily squirrel, distracted with everything. So she said she puts herself, and that's kind of what I thought you were going for, but I love your idea, but I might use it at the same time with this one. It's a timer where you give yourself 15 minutes, but you focus on one task, and that is it, and see how much of that you can get done.
Well, and that's a huge point, because what we know from cognitive research is you can only focus on one thing at a time, one concentrated thing, right? So many of us were taught to multitask, and now what we know is there's no such thing as multitasking. What you're doing is you're breaking your attention, and is how fast can you regain your attention? Well, it takes a minimum of 20 seconds depending on the task, sometimes longer. So like those of us that are writing fiction, especially if we have some world building involved, it takes us a little bit just to get back into the world and then to pick up where we left off. So every time you're distracted, every time you're interrupted, it takes you that much longer to get back to where you were. So if you can close your door for 20 minutes and focus in on that one task, that's why the Pomodoro method is so fabulous. They suggest 25 minutes and then a 5-minute break. And that's how I won NaNoWriMo that year. I thought it was a joke, and I set out that year. I wasn't intending to finish the thing. I just wanted to try out all these different techniques and see which one was really the most valuable. And hands down, the Pomodoro technique got the most words on the paper.
I'm gonna have to try that next time.
And Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato, because it's the little tomato timers that you see in the kitchen. And you just set it for 25 minutes, and then you must get up and move away and do something else for at least 5 minutes. And it works.
And I can do that. I could spend, 25 minutes working on one thing, and then spend 5 minutes just walking away for a minute.
Yep.
Like that's not a hard thing to do.
It's the right, that 5-minute break is time to refill your tea, time to take the dog out, time to change the laundry. You can get a lot done in those 5 minutes and then be back when that timer's ready to go again. So I thought it was going to be a joke, and it turned out to be one of the best tools. And I think too, when I'm teaching productivity, I always tell people to experiment, right? Life is one big experiment, I think. So try different things, because what works for me may not work for you. Do you need music when you're working? Do you need silence when you're working? Do you need a hot beverage or a scented candle? Figure out what works best for you. Do you get the most words written cuddled up on the couch or sitting at a proper desk? And that's an interesting thing too, because go figure, I can write fiction, my creative writing. I need to be in a comfy chair with my knees tucked up, and music playing, and I will be happy in my own world. But I cannot write content or nonfiction that way. Nonfiction content, anything business related, I've got to be at my desk.
So that's something kind of too that I've kind of changed my mindset about recently, because I really started digging into my method of how I approach things. And like there's a love language. People have love language, a different love language. I think people have different writing languages.
Absolutely.
Like I know friends who can listen to certain songs that I cannot listen to when I'm writing, or else I will start writing them out.
Yes.
So
if it has lyrics, I can't do it.
Same
I
way.
listen to a lot of jazz and a lot of classical, because anything with lyrics, all of a sudden I'm focused in, and I think it's because I'm very word centric.
Same here. I'm the same way, exact same way, because I'll have to listen to like cinematic music or anything. Anything orchestral.
But then all of a sudden I'm going, wait, what movie was that from? So that can be distracting too. But in that thing changes too, because I know different seasons of my life, those techniques change, and what I'm working on, it changes. So again, don't be afraid to say, with a new project, maybe you need a new type of music or a new candle or a new space to write in. I think we're smart to revisit and adjust as we go.
Absolutely. And I think too, as writers, we have to be willing to evolve and change with like each new book or each new, like you said, even social media platform. We have to be able to look into the next thing that's going to help our writing and get more readers.
Absolutely.
So Kathryn, where can authors find more information about you?
Well, since I'm a social media person, I'm on all the platforms. If you go to my website, KathrynMcClatchy.com, you will see the links to my Instagram, my Facebook, my Twitter, my LinkedIn, Snapchat, WhatsApp, just all the stuff. So yeah, find me there. The Facebook group, if you go into groups under Facebook, go to Unleashing the Next Chapter. There's also a link on my website if you're interested in that. And I also want to make sure that your readers don't feel overwhelmed by the information that we've given them and the talk about social media. I fully understand that there are writers who want to do nothing but write for 8 to 10 hours a day, or who just want to, write their book and do not want to deal with the technology or the social media side of it. And that's a service I also offer. So if you are looking for a social media professional who understands writers and the writing community, I have room for 2 more clients at the moment. I do everything from branding and platform building to helping you create social media content and posting it and managing it. So that's something that I love to do. And I also do speaking for writing groups, both online and in person. So wherever you are when you're hearing this, if you want to schedule a Zoom presentation, I've got a number of presentations listed on my website that I talk about. Specifically, my pet topics are about social media, productivity, platform building, and then if you want to talk about service dogs or invisible disabilities, I'm your girl.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. I enjoyed our chat.
Thank you so much to Kathryn McClatchy for being part of the podcast. If you'd like to hear more of this content and find out when I post the next podcast, please be sure to subscribe. Or you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Romance the Story. Book recommendations for this episode: The Power of When by Michael Bruce.